I hope you all are ready today because we're going to take this $13.88 porcelain wonder that I bought used on eBay and turn it into an UnAmerican Girl Doll. Alright y'all, imagine an American Girl doll, but instead of being made out of vinyl and 18 inches tall, it's going to stand 24 inches tall and be made out of porcelain. And instead of the mass manufactured outfit, she is going to have the full historic treatment with hand-sewed garments that are all made from materials that would have been found in the Victorian and Edwardian period. And now imagine she's so much better than the American Girl doll that she's not even American at all, because she is Mary Lennox, specifically from the 1993 film The Secret Garden. Oh yeah. Now some of you all might ask, what brought about this project, Holly? And it all started when I was 9 years old. That was my first official birthday after being adopted from foster care, and I received my Samantha doll. And then a year later, when I was 10 years old, I saw The Secret Garden for the first time. And it blew my mind. I knew exactly what it was like to be Mary. I'd been severed from my parents when I entered into foster care, and I had to move to a completely new place and get to know strangers who would become my family. And I was kind of grumpy like her, and I totally got it. So for me, this just feels like the perfect mashup. So let's get started. I decided that I would start easy and make Mary's shawl. It was sourced from a black pashmina wool scarf that I've got used, and I simply pinned it to the size that it needed to be, then cut it out, and then I shortened the tassels to be doll sized and sewed it up with some silk thread, which is what I use throughout this project. And with that, the first garment was finished. Now that I had finished something easy and gained some confidence in this project, it was time to move on to something bigger and better, which was going to be her 5 different undergarments. I bought an extant christening gown, which came with an undergarment, and I used that undergarment to make Mary's chemise as well as her pantaloons by just cutting it in half. So I just finished the hem along at the chemise. This is what the original work looks like. It's quite gorgeous. Hand done, hand rolled. Okay, so in order to make these into pantaloons, I am going to need to cut down here, and I'm going to fold over this part to sew, and then the ribbon is going to be threaded in through there, and so it's just going to be tied in the back with a ribbon to keep these on. And yeah, it never gets less frightening to cut extant garments. It's really, honestly, something I might not ever want to do again. And then I used the leftover materials to give her a doll's version of a corset waist with some stocking suspenders. Turned out quite beautifully for underwear that people would never ever see in real life. So now with the shawl, we have 4 of the 13 garments completed for Mary. And what's next? Yeah, more underwear. We need to do the corset cover and the petticoat, both of which I made out of the christening gown itself, just by pretty much doing the same method as before, cutting it in half. And then I cut the sides down of the top because the doll is just not the size of a baby. Once I got those sides cut off, I removed the sleeves from the sides so that I could reattach them and sew it all up and it could be the right size.
I think it's interesting to show that even back then people, you know, especially hand sewing accuracy, it's just not always going to happen. Makes me feel a little bit better because if you see these 3 pin tucks, they end here at the collar. So those will be included once I sew the sleeve back on. But these pin tucks come outside of the collar instead of ending at it. So you're not really going to see those. So you're going to have 2 sets of pin tucks here and 1 here. So now I've got it all pinned up. This is what they did around the sleeves on the original garment. They kind of made a bias tape to cover up the seams, and so this is what I've done here. This one's finished, but I have to do it on everything else to make it look nice and clean. It's so cool to see stuff that's over 100 years old and just, yeah, someone did this. Someone tied these off. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to think of like the lives of the people who came before us.
Some of you all might be asking by now, why in the world is Holly hand sewing all of this? They had sewing machines in the Victorian and Edwardian era. And my answer is,
I am finally done with all of this. Now the only thing I have left to do is to get this bottom done, and then this whole corset cover will be done.
For the petticoat, I made a channel along the top and kept those channels open at the sides, and that way I could put ribbon in the front and back of the petticoat using that silk satin ribbon again, and then the petticoat could just be simply tied up. Garment number 7 was Mary's socks. I used an old wool sweater for those and just simply cut them into like a little conical type shape.
Bye-bye, little two-toned rag and bone sweater. And hello, stockings. They're inside out right now so that you can see my handiwork. Here they are right side out. They just have a little seam that runs down the back, and they have a hand-sewn buttonhole for the stocking suspenders.
Garment number 8 is the only garment of the 13 that I didn't have to make myself. I gave myself a little bit of a break here, and I bought some extant Victorian baby shoes. And though I didn't make these, it was harder work than you would think trying to find her exact size. Most of them were about 4 inches long, which would be much too big and look like clown shoes. But I finally found these for a great price on Etsy, and they look so much like her shoes from the movie, but just in miniature form. Oh, you're so cute as you are. Oh my god, you're so cute. So adorable. With garment 9 and 10, we are finally out of the underwear and into the actual clothing. We are going to work on the blouse and the skirt that Mary wears in these scenes. She actually wears them a few times in the film. You can see them in the scene that I am using, as well as the next day when she gets her skipping rope. And you can see the skirt pretty prominently when she is doing the little puppet theater with Colin. For these two garments, I used an extant child's wool winter petticoat that had a silk band that had homemade buttonholes. I can only assume were used to attach that petticoat to the buttons on the corset waist to keep it up. I pinned the petticoat according to my doll's waist size and cut off that excess material along the back and the bottom and set that aside for the blouse. And then the work began with sewing the back of the skirt. Now, I feel like there's probably some people screaming, why are you using extant garments? And I don't have a huge defense, but I have a few points to make, and you can take them as you will. So my small defense is that these two items, the christening gown set and the petticoat, I was able to find a multitude of them online fairly inexpensively, so I knew I wasn't cutting up and repurposing extant garments that were rare. So my second argument being is that I would never use extant garments on a human. And why is that? Because humans move and sweat and get food on their clothing, etc. While this is a doll who is not going to be traveling outside. Does it move? I don't think. And she's just going to be a showpiece. So there is not going to be any extra wear and tear on these garments. So I knew that I could show off not just my work, but all of the work that was done on these garments in a new way to where they weren't just folded and hidden in a drawer and kept at a side. And my last argument is that I did make sure that of these items that I found, I purchased the ones that I saw had damage to them. And apparently I felt very bougie because I decided to get out a thimble, which I never ever use. Now I know a lot of people say that you must use a thimble in order to be a professional sewist, but I've been sewing since I was 9 years old and I've never used a thimble. I think namely because I have dyspraxia and it just makes me even more fumbly. So I don't know, take that.
I have been doing these sort of like pin tucks on the skirt, and I bought some tailor's chalk, which made me feel very professional. And I had to, before I got the tailor's chalk, I had to redo this sewing like 3 times because it just wasn't up to standard. But I just really want to talk more about the fact that, like, as I've been sewing this skirt, like, something kind of magical's been happening. I've just reached this like point of like pure like bliss doing this.
Oh, Holly, you poor sweet naive little lamb. Little do you know that you are going to cease to have this feeling when you start working on the blouse, so much so that you don't even really film any of it. But I will give you the rundown. The reason why I wanted to use the bottom of the petticoat for the blouse is because it had that gorgeous embroidery. And so I turned it on its side and let it run down the front of the blouse. For the back, that's where it actually opens, since it's a doll blouse and not a human blouse. And it has just hook and eyes for ease. And the front, I found some gorgeous Victorian buttons, and those make the faux front of the blouse. Luckily, I got a huge break for Mary's iconic turtleneck, which is so prominent in the scene where Martha very cheekily puts it over Mary's face, which forces Mary to pull it down and start having a little bit of autonomy. And I just used a moth hole ridden vintage United Colors of Benetton sweater, and I mean, I feel a little genius with this because all I did was cut off one sleeve, and that became the turtleneck portion and the bodice of the turtleneck. And I cut 2 holes in it, and then I cut off the other sleeve of the sweater, and then cut that sleeve in 2, and those became Mary's sleeves for her sweater, and just sewed it into the holes and hemmed the bottom of the sweater. I mean, the turtleneck was garment 11, so now we are up to 12, the most difficult of all the garments, and that is Mary's wool coat. For that, I used a Banana Republic Italian wool sports jacket and ripped the synthetic lining out of it and threw that away. And then I began freaking out. I didn't really know where to start, so I decided the sleeves would be the place. They seemed super simple because they just go from the shoulders to your armpits, and they kind of make a shape like this, and then 2 little straight cuffs, and then you've got some sleeves. Once the sleeves were constructed and I felt like I wasn't just alone in the jungle, I was able to eyeball the front and back and cut them out. And just to reiterate, I didn't use a pattern. I didn't even measure. I just kind of laid the doll on top of the fabric and began cutting. I don't know why my brain, no, I do know why my brain works the way it does. It's called autism, but I digress. So I got those on, and then I just haphazardly hand stitched in a 100% cotton lining. Again, because this is a doll version of the coat, I didn't make any buttonholes. I just attached buttons to the front, and then I used a hook and eye to attach it at the collar because I really wanted the jacket to splay open so that you could see a part of the turtleneck and the skirt. Her jacket has the most adorable little flap on it and pointed collar in the front, so I cut that out. And I used more silk satin ribbon for the trim and hand embroidered the embellishment that goes along her jacket in order to be, pared down to doll size. And then I just simply cut out 2 pockets and stitched them on and hoped that I had kind of made them semi-symmetrical. So now we're finally down to garment number 13, and that is her world famous red toboggan, beret, tam, headwear, whatever you want to call it. I'm gonna pull out a little sarcasm here and say, shockingly, I didn't use a pattern here. I had actually made a hat like this for myself in green, and I remembered the stitches, and so I just started and would kind of measure it to the doll's head as I went. And then because Mary's hat has a big honkin' pom-pom on there that is a slightly darker color than the beret itself, I went ahead and made that, and I feel like I could just have a job making pom-poms all day long. It's a ton of fun. So that's it, 13 garments for one outfit. So we're done now, right? Right? No, actually we're not done yet. We have 4 accessories, but luckily I didn't have to make any of those. I used some luscious silk velvet ribbon for her hair, and then I had to cut it off to make it to the proper length. And a fun fact here, my doll Mary and Mary from the movie have something in common because Kate Maberly was wearing a wig the whole time. And although I didn't have to make the skipping rope because I repurposed one from UnAmerican Girl Doll, I did have to sand it down because it was a navy blue, and I had to replace the string, so I feel like I made it. And American Girl Doll really does make quality products because it was really hard to get that blue off. My dad had a collection of skeleton keys, which I was given when he passed away, and so I used one of those for the Secret Garden key. And my mom gave me an elephant pendant that belonged to my great-grandmother. I'm not really sure what it's made out of, but I'm kind of hoping it's not an ivory elephant. Okay, so with the ribbon, the skipping rope, the elephant, and the key, we now have 13 garments and 4 accessories. So are you all finally ready to see the before and after? let's go ahead and get Mary dressed. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I also hope that it encouraged some people to get into hand sewing. Most of this entire outfit was made with a whip stitch and a back stitch. So although it can be tedious and time consuming, it really isn't rocket science or brain surgery. So I hope you all have been encouraged to go forth and have some fun. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for all notifications. Bye!